Welcome to Future Ready Live, where we talk about topics that will help CPAs, CGMAs, and their organizations prepare for change and transformation. I'm Tom Hood. I'm the Executive Vice President of Business Engagement and Growth at the AICPA SEMA. And today we're going to be talking about what it takes to be a future ready CFO and becoming a true value partner to your organization. And I'm really excited because joining me is Ebonie Jackson. Now, she's got a lot of accomplishments I want to run through here. She's a CPA, a CITP, and a CGMA, just like me, Ebonie. That's pretty cool. She's now the CFO and Director of Administrative Services at Lucas County Children's Services, a member of the AICPA Board of Directors, where she also currently or has previously served on a number of committees, former member of the Ohio Society of CPAs Board of Directors, 2020 Outstanding CPA and Government Award winner for local impact, graduate of the AICPA Leadership Academy, where I met you. She has a reputation for being able to improve the finance of an organization. And most recently, she was featured in one of our major white papers where she used strategic foresight to identify the emerging trends of ESG and DEI to position her nonprofit in a very innovative way that makes major social impact and inspires others. Ebonie, welcome.
Thank you, Tom. I'm so excited to be here. Tom has always been one of the people that I would say I look up to in the profession. He, even though he said we have similar credentials, he's like way more strategic than me. But no, he's wonderful, and I am so glad to be on this broadcast.
Well, I would say you're catching up fast, Ebonie. So I'm very proud of you to see all the things you're doing. So let's get right into it. Let's start with what you did related to ESG and DEI. Can you share what led to this and how they were instrumental in your strategic planning process at the organization?
Sure. So I am so lucky to work for Lucas County Children's Services in the leadership team. That the team, Robin Reese, who is my executive director, she brought me in to help with the finances and administrative services of the organization, and somehow put on me the strategic planning. And so anyway, because of what we do children's services, which means that we protect, we lead the community in the protection of children that are risked for abuse and neglect. And to do that, you have to really understand your community. And so the ESG and looking at environmental social, which is important for me in governance, is huge in doing that. So you have to look at the social trends to know how to protect children. And so when we were doing our strategic planning, we use the social factors to help us in the planning, which seems really simple, right? Because you think, okay, we're protecting children. That's a social, usually when something's happening with a child, it's usually having to do with social interactions, bad social interactions usually. So you would think you would look at that. But not only did we look at the social stuff that we normally look at, like abuse, instances, calls, and what kind of types, we also looked at the type of children that were getting what we call referrals. So we looked at how many children that we had in our custody that got their families were called in that were of different racial makeup. And that was actually in social work, it's kind of like a general thing that people know what they call disproportionality, which means one group is disproportionately represented in something than another. So, for example, in Lucas County, when we were doing this, there were 51,281 families. Of that, 65% of those families were white and 22% were African American. So that's big in our county because that's where the disproportionality is. So you would think 65% of the children in our care would be white, but they're not. It's 44%. And African American, you would think 22%, and it was 34%. So that concept wasn't new, but actually using it for strategic planning was new.
Wow. So So you applied your kind of finance background to start thinking about how would we measure, how would we look at this kind of stuff. And all right, so tell me more about the impact that your organization is having as you recognize these ESG and DEI trends, right?
Right. So the top data is just like the beginning, right? Because you are saying, okay, there's more Black children as
At risk.
disproportionately represented than white children. What does that mean? So for us is who's calling in? Who's calling into the agency? That's how anything starts. We don't just go looking for children. We actually get calls in from the community, and the community says, hey, this child is at risk, right? So who's calling in? So we actually went deeper into our data because, of course, I'm a data nerd. And so to say, hey, who are the referral sources? So we looked at legal, so legal and law enforcement. We looked at medical. We looked at the schools. We looked at social services, and we actually looked at private citizens. And basically, based upon, like, for example, law enforcement and legal, 34% of when they called in, when you look at the total, if they called in, 34% of their calls were for white families, and 39% were for Black families. So when you look at that, you're like, okay, so this is where we're starting. A normal citizen, it was 47% for private, of the private citizens, it was for white families, and 30% for Black. So that's our big numbers. And of course, you have the other races, of course, there too, but we looked at that. So that meant, what does that mean? That means, who do we need to talk to when we're talking to disproportionality? So who do we need to go in the community to have discussions about and say, hey, did you know about this? It's easier to have that conversation instead of saying, I think you are calling in more, than to say, hey, these are the numbers. It probably is nothing, but let's see what can we do to dig deeper and why. And so a lot of times it's because of poverty. When you think about neglect, which is most of our calls, it's because a child is coming to school, they don't look like they are taken care of, and family people want to just help, right? So they call in and we have to investigate. So we kind of get down to the whys, but we can do that at the community, and we can know who to actually target and have those conversations with and to partner with, which is nice because one of the things we're doing that happened with this is that now we're meeting with, we have a training. I actually am over training and development as well with the police department this month. And we're going to be talking about more so how do they interview people that are traumatized, and we bring in this type of data too, because trauma usually intersects with some of the biases and stuff like that, and how you deal with communities. So it should be interesting.
Wow. So when you think about like how this manifests itself in your strategic plan then. So how did you like develop actionable things and all around that? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So it was first, okay, anytime you do a strategic plan, you have to validate your mission, right? And so for us, in the validation of the mission, once we put those numbers up there just to kind of be in there as a part of the environmental scan, okay? And so when you're validating your mission, you kind of see, is that where you're supposed to go? And so for us as social workers, we actually do what we call a practice model. And so it's basically, how do you show up and how does your mission show up in the community? So before we did this, we had a practice model that is that we are strength based, which means that we really look at our family strengths, and that we are trauma informed, and we're evidence based. So that's how we were actually going into the actual community. But after this, we changed it to be culturally competent. So we put that at the beginning of our practice model, and we're strength based. We're family centered, and we are child focused. So we realized that in this process that we weren't child focused before. We were, but we were doing a lot of services for the adults, and we weren't always bringing it back to, is the child going to be traumatized in our system? And then we are trauma informed. So it changed our practice model. So now it has cultural in it.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Now, so all right, so first of all, it's not usual that a CFO leads the strat planning piece. So tell us a little bit about how that came to be. And I know you have some prior experience doing that as well.
Well, I think Tom is my reason that I'm so good at strategy, to tell you the truth. I actually was in the Leadership Academy, and it's really serious. I was in the Leadership Academy, and one of the things we did was insight to action. So, Tom, that's one of his things. It really helped me as a professional to really look at everything to how do you use whatever kind of numbers, whatever kind of information, fiscal information to be actionable. Well, that's really useful in the government because guess what? We get a lot of funding sources, and usually it's for a social service. And so, how do you align that funding source to better that social service? And so, when you're thinking about strategic planning, when 52% of our money comes from the taxpayers in our area, you have to get everybody aligned in the community so they can vote for your 52% tax, right? That's
Yeah.
basically taking 52% of our budget, and then the rest of the money, 9% comes from the state, and then the rest comes from the federal reimbursement. So it's all government money. So it's all mission based money. So why would not put the finance person that loves to align financial sources to the mission in charge of the strategic plan?
You're making a great case for a lot of CFOs out there in our audience to be saying, why don't you pick up this strategic planning function? Because you do have a lot of those unique notions. Now, so I also understand you went through some digital transformation there too. Tell us about that, because that's another thing that's on a lot of the CFOs' minds.
So for us, I'm in government, and so when I first came into government, into this organization, we had a really strong, I would say, legacy finance team and IT team. IT works with me too, but they were still really building based. Like, we're caseworkers, we should be in the community, but they still had a lot of desktops, et cetera. And so we really wanted to figure out how do we help the caseworkers get out there with the community. So in doing that, I pretty much kind of just changed the place. We just were trying to figure out how to stop having desktops, have iPads, things that you can connect with. We talked about caseworker safety. We decided that we need to have something to help the caseworkers be safe in the community. So we did some what we call alert systems. So they actually have tethers. They have a phone, and if they're in a house and there's a problem, they pull the tether out the phone, and an alarm comes, and they call the police. We did a new ERP system. We're in our third phase of Oracle. We went because we're going to go into the cloud and be doing more stuff outside. We did Office 365 and changed all of our servers. We also did a lot of upskilling of our staff during that, because if you're going to have all these new IT things, you're going to be doing things differently. You have to actually have different skills. So we did a big upskilling of our staff, just a lot, and it was all within a really quick time. It was before the pandemic. So if we were not ready, if we had not gotten all of the desktops, so we have about 400 staff. When I got here, there were probably 10 laptops. Now everybody has a Surface or a Surface and an iPad, depending on their thing. And the good thing is that we aligned with the state to help us fund it.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So you were ready when the big switch got flipped to remote, I guess, right?
We were pretty much ready. We had all of the we were in the middle of the implementation. We had already ordered everything before everybody took all of all of the wonderful supply chain issues happened. We already had the stuff in our building, so it was really just rolling it out, teaching people how to do things differently, like getting a list of, this is your old way of doing things. Now you need to do this new one in your home. So that's why we had to do a lot of upskilling, right? Because a lot of people were learning their new skills at home.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about some of those skills? We're always curious about what are those skills. By the way, one of my favorite quotes comes from a futurist, Mike Walsh, who says, if you automate, you must elevate the skills of your team. That's been a mantra we've been using. And obviously we talk a lot about upskilling and reskilling. Just give us a few of the things that you thought were highlights that really made an impact as you upskilled.
So one of the things that people laugh. This is my my word. This is my new word. It's paperless ish. So we are paperless ish. And so before we were pushing around paper to basically do all of our POs, to do contracts, etc. And so once we got Oracle, we didn't have to do that anymore. We still had to scan the documents though. And so it was in the middle of the pandemic. And so we had to, the ish, what I say is my clerical staff. I have an excellent clerical team. And they stayed in the building while everybody was out in the pandemic, and they were scanning things so all the caseworkers can get things. So that was one of the things we had to teach is how to do, use Oracle, how to use a workflow. Another thing that we taught for my clerical staff was actually how to do change management, how to not be like the people in the building that are really upset that they're in the building, and how to still have that when people do have to come in, have that levity on the floor. We also taught for my IT team, they had to do a lot of support that was from the building while everybody else was in. So teaching those types of skills. My accounting team was pretty were troopers again with Oracle. And so it was just a lot of computer skills, I think. And then also the change management. And then also how do you look at like organizing, like one of the things that we had to do for my team is that we had to have visits. So visitation before COVID were between parents and their kids that were staying in foster homes, and they were in person. So guess what? We had to teach everybody and the kids how to do Zoom, how do you schedule Zoom, how do you make sure that everybody could do that. So it was just a lot at one time. And we had a list of like 30 different trainings on Excel, on Office, on all those fun things. So it was a lot, but it was good.
It's pretty cool that you actually influence the whole community by teaching them how to use Zoom and technology to keep all those meetings happening, and that's pretty neat.
And you know what? We also did, we're talking about educating the community. We have a thing called Parent Empowerment Institute that we did to actually get to families that were not within our system.
Right.
So basically making sure that they could, like we had a homeschool teacher who came and taught, and it's on our Facebook page. How do you set up your home for virtual school, and how do you not get stressed out with all the kids in the house the whole time? So stuff like that as well.
Yeah, that's super important, right? Especially in this crazy environment that we're in, right? Now, all right, so anything else? How's your role changed since the pandemic started back in March?
Whew, a lot.
I mean, a lot of things you talked about were all part of that, I suspect. But yeah, what about any core big things in your role as CFO
You
that
know, we have to do a lot of, again, we had CARES Act during the pandemic. We have ARPA. So digging into rules again and trying to align funding. So I think I was doing it before, but I feel as though I'm doing it more. A lot of virtual conversations with leaders, finance leaders, with the state, with the governor's team on how can we advocate for the governor's budget. So a lot of advocacy work that I probably would have had to do before, but I had to do more of that now. Um, a lot of it happened. We talk about the innovation that happened during the pandemic. It was huge. One of the big things that happened here is that we started getting more technology push for technology, right? So one of the cool pushes that we did is that we have virtual goggles. So now that we can basically have caseworkers when we're trying to train them or we were trying to recruit, they can actually put goggles on. And it was actually, I think it's Accenture program. And they basically can see and go through a whole case and see what it feels like. We can also use those with our legislators when I'm trying to get them to give us more money. So it's really cool. And they have a D&I, a diversity scenario on how taking the same family from different races and see if you would have assessed them and called in a referral differently. So it's like all pretty much all within our strategic plan. So it kind of just focused us.
That's amazing. So they've actually built those applications out that would fit your use case, and so it's augmented reality, I guess, right? Or
It
virtual and
is.
augmented, VR, AR. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it helps us. So, what a good focus strategic plan does for you is it helps you focus. So, during the pandemic, we really focused. We started the strategic plan in 2019, right? So, we really focused on keeping kids out of foster care, focused on reducing the disproportionality in our system. We had that kinship institute I told you. That
Mhm.
was a part of our plan, leveraging collaborations and doing process improvements. So because we already had a plan, it was really focused, and because it helped us advocate. So when we talked to our senators and our Congress people, all of the legislatures, that we knew what to talk about. When we talked to the governor, when he's asking us what we want for our budget, and we are in those meetings, we knew what to ask for. So because we're a part of the training development system, so we are over the region for training for child protection, then we got to have those conversations. We would really like this, we would really like that. So we were very focused. We were on a lot of the teams, and so we knew what to do. So we had a plan. So even though we were going through the pandemic, we were laser focused. And one of the big ways to keep children in their out of foster care is to keep them in their families. Even if they're having the parents are having an issue, they still have grandparents, they have aunts and uncles. You don't have to remove them for those people they know. You can just need to remove them from the people causing harm at that time. And so that was one of the big strategies we came up with by looking at those numbers, was to keep families together. And in doing that, we could keep them out of foster care. So we had a big, bold, audacious goal of reducing the kids in foster care by 75%. And to tell you the truth, usually in a child protection agency, if you're over 50% of your kids that are in kinship placement, so with their family, that's good. In August, I just did a training on this, so I have the number fresh. In August, we had 91% of the kids that were removed. 91% of the kids that were removed in August were placed within their family system.
Wow.
And so it's really important to be focused and having that resources align with that focus.
Wow. That's incredible, Ebony. I mean, that's wow. And so I love I mean, there's so many takeaways in here. You covered the whole ground of things that we think CFOs should be doing, but you're doing it at a scale of impact that few of us get to actually do, right? When you're impacting people's lives at the level that you are. I mean, 91% in family, and you're teaching them and giving them tools and resources, and you led that right from your strat plan side with your organization. So that I love the focus idea. You know that gave you we know what we're trying to do, and now any conversation you have, you're listening for the things that you need to bring in so that you can create that impact that you're trying to do. And then clearly you're measuring it, right, and reporting on it.
Oh, definitely. You know, we do that. We are so the good thing is that the leadership team here is so good, and so like I got to lead the strategic plan, but everybody leads their own area. So we did something, and I probably learned this from you too, Tom. We did like innovation lab type things where after we did the little theoretical strategic plan, we went through with the leaders and had each one of the areas have leaders, and we backtracked and we have an operational plan that supports it. And so we made sure we had goals. So then that means it's theirs. So
Right.
we got to lead the thought process and the actual thing and the board and all that stuff as it relates to the process. But the best strategic plans are the ones that are taken on by the actual operations people.
Yeah.
And our operations team is amazing. So like they all sit on like those task force. Like I sit on the finance ones, of course, but they sit on the operational different committees at the state level. Our executive director, she sits on like 2 or 3 governor task force. But if you look at those, what we're doing, they all align with that plan. And so it has been, I love the people I work with. It's been amazing, but they have really, we've gotten in programs that were funded by the state that align with kinship, right? That align with keeping kids. We're of course in in one of those places where opioids was big in Ohio. So we do a lot of drug treatment stuff. We have a drug treatment officer that helps us. So everything that we did, that funding that we want to try to align, went towards what we said we were going to do. And our board keeps us making sure that we are being aligning. So we report quarterly to them. And we have diversity dashboards. We have really good data analysts. We have a PhD and a data analyst team on that reports actually to the service side. Actually, it's awesome. And so we have the finance side and the service side working together, and it's amazing.
Wow. So this is what we talk about as the CFO evolving role, right? The idea of a value partner. So if you had to name the like top 4 or 5 skills that are critical and that you're probably continuing to enhance, what would they be to be the type of CFO you're talking about? Strategy, had to do digital transformation, collaborating across the unit, getting buy-in from everyone. What would you say some of those key things that come to mind are?
So one that was probably the hardest for me to do, especially early in my career, and I'm good at it now. So I'm good now, is listening. Listening was really important because as a CFO, you probably have a really good bank of how to get things done and how to get things funded. And all you have to do is listen to where those connections are. There's always intersections. And usually you can catapult any type of idea if you can get the funding for it. So listening to where that funding can go and how to strategize. Another thing I would say, so that's 1, 2, especially when it comes to the social part of ESG, is to be able to lean into difficult conversations and be able with people that don't look like you. And be able to really understand the differences. I think I've learned so much in the social work environment. They do a lot of team decision making because of the fact that we're dealing with people's lives and life and death a lot of times sometimes. And so that skill of how do you lean into what people on really social topics that you're not used to talking about in a business setting was really interesting. And then being able to step back from your feelings, from what you think about people and what you think that you know about people, and really say, okay, that was a really good thought. I mean, that was good, and this is why that was offensive. And then you usually come with the best solution when you listen to everybody and do it in a way that is intentional, especially on those really hard to talk about topics. Always collaborating. That's one of the things I've definitely learned through Leadership Academy is that I talk to Leadership Academy people, to some of the people that are leaders in our field, and just collaborate. It helped me to collaborate with social services agencies. I talked to the county, I talked to the city. All of them have helped me during this time. Talked to the governor's office, talked to the Job and Family Services, and then just the community. So that collaboration skill is really, really important. Also, I would say understanding just where you fit, like that whole understanding how systems work, and understanding what systems do. So for me, I know that systems just they take the human out of people sometimes, and they deal with stereotypes, I think. And so that's how you get the disproportionality, right? People, once a person gets in the system, they're more monitored. So they can get deeper and deeper and deeper in the system. And we have data on that in my strategic plan too, about not only who calls in, but how deep it gets in our system. If you get in our system, it's really hard. And we know that. And we have to say that. So knowing that, and then just keeping up on what's going on around you, like the news, the trends, the futurist stuff, what's going to go in the future, because we wouldn't even have thought of those. Thought about talking about virtual reality, and Accenture probably was already doing that project like way long time ago, right? Because they think that way. But then to know to go look for that, or talk to the state and they look for that. So yeah, those types of things. Stay current and be continuous lifelong learning.
Yep.
That is it.
Wow. So you just rattled off a lot there, but I caught listening. So I hope everyone's out there listening to you for this thing because you're full of good stuff. Collaboration, another big one. I get the strategic thinking. That's another piece there that was underneath of all of that. Clearly, the idea of looking at those trends and saying, what about that could affect us? That's brilliant how you found the AR/VR piece. So, yeah, I knew this was going to be amazing. And so here we have a CFO in a social impact organization doing ESG and DEI as a CFO and bringing all of that in. Wow, Ebony, what a great story. And thank you so much for being on here. So I do want to say um, thank you, Ebony, right now. So thank you a whole lot. Um, I want you to follow her on LinkedIn, Ebonie Z Jackson. For the rest of our audience, thank you for joining me. And don't miss our other Future Ready Live sessions. Follow the hashtag Future Ready Live, all one word. We'll be back here on LinkedIn the first and third Tuesday of every month at noon Eastern. So we'll see you at the next one. Thank you.